So, most of you who come to these gatherings have been listening to us for a while. You've been listening to recordings. You hear us offering processes. And the processes, without exception, have been processes to assist you in releasing resistance, because we know when you let go of the cork, it's going to float. In other words, we know that when you release the thoughts that are resistant in nature, your natural well-being will return, and it will be evidenced in all ways in your life experience. So we've offered processes like pivoting, which simply say, think about what you do want, not what you don't want. Let the contrast help you to know what you don't want, but as soon as you're sure what it is you don't want, and what you do want becomes clear, then start talking about what you do want and why you want it, and pretend it, imagine it, play with it. Processes like scripting, which simply say, write it out the way you want it to be. Pretend that your pen has power. It does. And write until you feel emotionally moved. Write until you feel the clarity of your own desire. But we have to say to you that the reason that the processes that we've been offering over time have been so effective with those of you who have been gathering is because most of you, if we feel your vibrational meter, weigh in somewhere in the area of frustration, overwhelmment, somewhere in there, ranging from that all the way up into appreciation and love and passion. So the emotional scale that we're going to play with here today, at the most disconnected levels, that's where that powerlessness and despair is. That's where you would use words like depression. And then, as you move up a little bit, you would find yourself in some feelings of rage, revenge. Remember those two words, rage and revenge, because we want to show you that they're not in the order that you think they are. All the way up into anger. Then from anger, there are many degrees of anger, but then you get into those feelings of overwhelmment and frustration. And then you find that pessimistic feeling, and then you find that hopeful feeling, and then you find that more optimistic feeling, and then you find feelings of appreciation and love and joy and bliss and all of that. So there's this range which you can feel when you think about it. What we've noticed with those like you, most of you are somewhere in overwhelmment and frustration, but you can quite easily, with a little bit of effort, move into ranges of true appreciation. You can maintain your vibration rather well. But often you meet someone, or even now and again something happens in your experience that is out of your control, that cause you to dip into those ranges that are more like depression. And what we've noticed, sometimes someone who is truly depressed, truly feeling disempowered, finds unconsciously, in a sort of self-survival way, guided from source really, finds a true thought of anger, even hatred and revenge. But usually the counselor or the spouse or the parent or someone close by who is watching this person move from despair into revenge gets all alarmed and tells them that their revenge or their hatred or their anger is misplaced. And we say, it's not the least bit misplaced if you understand the emotional meter. It's an improved state of being. But most people who meet you in your anger or in your rage would not encourage you to be that way. They really prefer you in your despair and depression. Because when you're depressed, you hide from everyone and leave them all alone. And when you're angry, you're usually out there fussing around, sort of stirring things up. You're actually more pleasant to be with when you're depressed than when you're angry. But from an emotional standpoint, from a vibrational standpoint, from the standpoint of which cork is floating more, if the cork is in the revenge mode, it's closer to the surface than when it is in the despair and depression. In other words, you're on your way back into the light as you are moving through, and that's the key word, as you are moving through this angry range. But what happens when you don't know that is you get from despair naturally into anger, but then everyone disapproves of your anger, and since you're more interested in how they feel than you are about how you feel, then you bounce back into despair. And there are so many people that just bounce back and forth from despair to anger, to despair, to anger, to despair, to anger, and do not have any idea that they were on the right path. Jerry and Esther traveled in the past, even now sometimes, from Phoenix to San Diego. It's about a 400-mile journey. And as they come out across the highway, Esther loves these open highways, hardly any traffic, good roads. About halfway between Phoenix and San Diego is Yuma, Arizona. When they find themselves in Yuma, they don't pull off to the side of the road and cry. They don't feel despair that they are in Yuma, because they understand that they are on their way to where they want to be. They understand the distance between Phoenix and San Diego. And so even though for a good deal of the journey, in fact, almost all of it, in fact, most of that journey, they're not really where they want to be. They're on their way to where they want to be, but they're not there yet. It is a quantifiable journey, though, isn't it? It's understandable. And so, since you know you're on your way, then you find pleasure where you are. But if they thought they would never get there, that this was as far as they could ever get on their way, there would be despair, we promise you. What happens with people who are making these emotional journeys is that they often do not have a quantifiable journey. In other words, they don't understand that they can tell which direction they're headed. In other words, Jerry and Esther don't get so dismayed when they're in Yuma that they get all disoriented and go back to Phoenix. In other words, they can always tell which way they're going. But sometimes we watch you and you don't seem to know which way is up in terms of the cork floating, or which way is moving up the emotional scale, because you sort of get lost in the emotion where you are and you beat the drum of where you are. So moving up the emotional scale is about recognizing where you are on the emotional scale, and we'll show you how to do that. You just feel around until you're able to pinpoint it pretty well, and then you reach for an emotional goal that you believe is possible. Isn't it annoying when you feel terrible to have some bright-eyed, bushy-tailed Abraham student or teacher telling you to follow your bliss? You create your own reality, they say. You need to stop doing that. What you really want to do is just eliminate them from the face of the earth. In other words, when there is a big difference in the vibrational frequencies, there's not much help that comes. And so what we're wanting to show you is how you can bridge your vibration into something that is absolutely manageable. So think about it. If you are in a place of utter despair or depression, and you're reaching for some thoughts of hatred or revenge, don't you acknowledge when you find them that they do feel better? In other words, don't ask the world to vote on the appropriateness of them, because they'll tell you those thoughts are not appropriate and that you should have been reaching for love. And we don't disagree. You are reaching for love, but you can't find love from that despair. It's too far vibrationally apart, you see. So as you reach for something that you can reach for, Jerry always said, as he was teaching people in business, set your goals far enough away that they inspire you, but not so far that you feel discouragement. Put the basket out there far enough away that it is a challenge and exciting when you hit it, but not so far that it's impossible to hit it. And this is the same thing. You're wanting to reach for an emotion that you have access to, that you and only you, because no one else knows, is a vibrational improvement. So you reach for that life-giving anger, and you beat the drum of it for a little while. And then, once you stabilize in anger, once you leave depression behind, are you hearing what we're getting at? When you stabilize in anger, now you have access to frustration, where you did not have access to frustration from your despair. So now you stabilize in your frustration, now you have access to some hopefulness, where you did not have access to hopefulness from your rage, maybe from your anger, but certainly not from your despair. You get the sense of this? So think about it. It's so logical. And as you play it, you'll see how well it works. If you are beating the drum of despair because something that has happened that you cannot control and it's knocked the wind out of you, you feel terrible, and now you're reaching for some thoughts of anger, and as you consciously do it, you're doing it on purpose, and you find that anger and suddenly you're breathing again. In other words, you don't feel so claustrophobic, you can catch your breath, you're feeling better, your friends still don't like you, but you feel better. You feel better. You've done it deliberately, and now you say, I've done that on purpose. Do you see? Can you feel what that does in terms of feeling of powerlessness? When you say, I'm choosing this angry thought on purpose, you're no longer powerless, are you? And so here's the magic of it. If you're making the best of where you are, which we've got to admit, it's not all that good. Rage is not the best place to be. It's just better than where you were. So if you make the best of it and beat the drum of it, and then you still make the best of it, you've got to feel angry. And if you still make the best of it, you've got to feel frustration. And if you still make the best of it, you're going to be in overwhelmment. And you still make the best of it, you're going to get into pessimism, and then you're going to get into hopefulness, and then you're going to get into optimism, and then you're going to get into a more playful... You get the sense of it? If you're making the best of it, there's no place that you cannot go. The difference is this time you can tell which direction you're facing. You can tell which direction you're facing so you don't have a meltdown in Yuma. You don't just spin there year after year after year after year after year after year, because finally your guidance system is working. Jerry and Esther have a navigational guidance system in their vehicles, and as they're coming across in the monster bus from one place to another, there is an antenna on the roof and a computer brain in the coach. And there are satellites in the sky which triangulate their position. So Magellan always knows where they are. And then they just program the address, the city, and the street, and even the numbers often of where they want to go. And Magellan then calculates the route for them from where they are to where they want to go. Magellan never says, "Where have you been?" Magellan never says, "How long have you been there?" Magellan never says, "I'm not going to tell you. You didn't listen last time." If Jerry and Esther don't pay attention to her and go in the opposite direction of what she says, it's a woman's voice. The man's voice was too bossy. If Jerry and Esther take another route or make a U-turn to get fuel, Magellan says, when it is possible, make a legal U-turn. In other words, she can tell that they are going in the other direction. And you can too. Your emotions, as they are getting better and better and better, mean you're headed toward where you want to be. But your emotions, as they are feeling worse and worse and worse, are telling you you're headed in the opposite direction of where you want to be. Sometimes you say, but it's true. And Magellan would say, it doesn't matter. It's still in the opposite direction of where you want to be. Don't pay any attention to what someone says is true. Only pay attention to if the truth, if the vibration, if the word, if the feeling is taking you toward where you want to be. So, here's the most significant thing for you to gather from everything that we've been saying here today. The distance between your poverty and your outrageous abundance is an emotional journey. It's not a financial journey. The distance between your physical incapacity or illness and fabulous vitality and wellness is not a physical improvement journey. It's an emotional journey. The distance between any place that you are and any place that you want to go is an emotional journey. It's about how good can I make myself feel about this and a lot of other things right now, because everything about your point of attraction is about your vibration, and your vibration is only about how you feel. So, when you say today, nothing is more important than I feel good, what you're saying is, today I'm using my guidance system on a myriad of subjects to move in the direction of my desire. So, if you're wanting more money and you're talking to someone who's discouraged about money and you begin to feel empathy of their discouragement, this friend has got you turned around. And your guidance system is saying, when possible, make a legal U-turn. In other words, your guidance system is pulling you that way. But sometimes what happens is you begin beating a drum, beating a drum, beating a drum, beating a drum relative to whatever. Maybe it's because people are surrounding you. Maybe it's because something has happened to you. Maybe it's because of something that you're observing or talking about. Maybe it's something personal to your life, and maybe it's something that's happening globally. It doesn't matter. But you've got yourself focused upon something so that you've got a very strong reverberation going on, and it feels to you like the thoughts are thinking you. It doesn't feel to you like you're choosing the thought. The thought just keeps showing up. You just find yourself thinking about it. You don't mean to think about it. You don't want to think about it. And that's when you've got to say, I'm going to start choosing my thoughts.